dangerous, particularly on the Gold Coast, and I have an update regarding some significant erosion to the rock wall on the coast, and I've just spoken with the CEO of the Gold Coast Council. There's extreme erosion between the Southport Surf Lifesaving Club and Narrow Neck, and the council engineers are actually since we last addressed you at 10 a.m, there's been 307 requests for assistance from the SES. A lot of those are for tarp roofs, but there's also been some sandbagging. So there's also been 36 requests in the Southern Downs. So that's preparatory work. We thank the SES for doing what they are doing. 107 on the Gold Coast and 44 in Brisbane, some of the other big numbers. The Queensland Fire Department have responded to 20 incidents today. Police have had 76 calls for assistance. 59 roads impacted on the Gold Coast. To door knocking, there's been 9,000 homes door knocked today. The Police Minister is actually out with some of those young recruits, going door to door and making people aware of the impending rainfall that's coming. We thank him, but more importantly, we thank the recruits who are yet to graduate from the academy and they're having their first taste of community service, and we thank them for that. There is now 30 disaster refuges that have been declared from councils. They are all on the website, which is disaster.qld.gov.au. That's disaster.qld.gov.au. It is particularly important that people who have made a plan when it comes to the potential for evacuation, if you are in some of those low-lying areas that might experience either storm surge as part of those council maps or those river floods, river and creek floods. Matt from the Bureau will brief you shortly about some of the impending predictions of the weather system that could lead to those flooding in those parts, and it's important that people do plan to know where those centres are if they're required. Of course, the best place to be is with friends and family, and we continue to articulate that. So the four key challenges, wave, wind, rainfall and flooding, exist, and they exist for different areas at different times. All eyes have been on the Gold Coast today, and indeed in parts of the Redlands, particularly the island communities. But as the system comes across, the likelihood of that rainfall and the potential for flooding will mean that other parts of that system will be in the firing line, and it's important that people do the preparation ahead of that. Rainfall today, since 10 a.m, the bulk of the falls have only been between 40 and 50 mil, which is tremendous, and that's Scenic Rim, Springbrook, Running Creek. So that takes their totals to around about 200 millimetres in a little over 24 hours, with major rainfall still expected. There is a potential for flooding in the rivers and creeks, and I'll ask Matt to touch on that shortly. A couple of other updates. The Redlands Satellite Health Centre has temporarily closed due to potential flood risk, but critical medical equipment has been relocated, as has the staff. So if there are people who require kidney dialysis or chemotherapy, they will still get that treatment. That has been communicated directly to them. The Wynnum Manly Primary Care Clinic has temporarily closed for safety, and that's related to backup power supply. Staff have also been redeployed. All hospitals remain open for emergency care, and we will continue to articulate that. I've said that we have staff there around the clock. Obviously, elective surgery has been cancelled, and we'll continue to not only relay that message to the individual patients through those health and hospital networks, we'll also do that daily to keep people updated, but those hospitals are there for people in their hour of need, and we sincerely thank everyone involved in that. Finally, courts and tribunals in those cyclone warning areas between Gympie and indeed the border, extending west to Ipswich and Gatton. Matters will be adjourned until a future date, although urgent matters are being heard remotely in Townsville, Cairns and Rockhampton, and we thank those people for that assistance. Before I hand over to Matt, I just wanted to say again to everyone involved, and I mean everyone involved, thanks for the efforts in the way that you have handled this event until now, and we're most grateful for the way that Queenslanders are dealing with the impending cyclone. Over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Premier, and good afternoon all. Tropical Cyclone Alfred remains a Category 2 system and is currently around 125 kilometres east of Brisbane. It continues to move generally west-southwest at around 8 kilometres per hour towards the southeast Queensland coast. The centre of Tropical Cyclone Alfred is still expected to approach the Bay Islands in the early hours of Saturday morning, then move across Moreton Bay during Saturday towards and just north of the Brisbane CBD. Warnings, as I mentioned earlier today, are being updated hourly. So there's tropical cyclone warnings every hour, and you can see the tropical cyclone on the radar imagery on the Bureau's app and on our webpage. The tropical cyclone warning remains in place from Double Island Point right down to the New South Wales-Queensland border, and we also have coastal hazards for large waves, abnormally high tides and coastal erosion in place, as well as a severe weather warning current for intense rainfall and damaging winds extending beyond that tropical cyclone warning area. A little bit about the impacts we're expecting over the coming hours and days. Damaging wind gusts to 120 kilometres per hour are occurring on the coast between Cape Moreton and Cape Byron. These damaging winds are still expected to continue through today and then pick up as the system approaches, and indeed extend from the sort of south coast and islands towards the mainland. Now, Category 2 systems have destructive wind gusts up to 150 kilometres per hour possible, and we are expecting the potential for these winds on the exposed island and southern coastal locations. That's Moreton stretching down through Stradbroke and towards the Gold Coast as the system approaches. So that's around the core of the cyclone and stretching south of the system. That's the critical destructive winds as the system crosses. Now, in terms of the Brisbane area and the Moreton Bay Islands, we are expecting the system to weaken as it comes across Moreton Bay to a Category 1 system. This will mean destructive winds are unlikely in Brisbane itself, but damaging wind gusts to 120 kilometres per hour are expected, particularly on the bayside suburbs around the southern flank of the system. Large swell and powerful waves are still a major concern with this system, and the Premier mentioned the extreme coastal erosion that's taken place. Tropical Cyclone Alfred has produced storm surge values up around 0.7 of a metre, and we are still concerned about the risk of storm tides as we move through the next high tides. The next high tide is around 3 a.m. in the morning and then 3 p.m. tomorrow afternoon. But the risk has reduced, and we aren't expecting those extreme, higher than 1 metre above the normal highest astronomical tides. In fact, we're expecting values up to half a metre around the sort of Gold Coast and increasing to around 0.7 of a metre for the southern Moreton Bay Islands and Redland. Rainfall totals of up to 200 millimetres have already been observed over the past 24 to 36 hours, mainly about the scenic rim and the Gold Coast, as the Premier mentioned. We're expecting these rainfall amounts to increase as the cyclone gets closer and also extend further west and north as the system approaches. We are expecting widespread totals of 300 to 500 millimetres across the duration of this event, and also the possibility of totals up to and exceeding 800 millimetres in some areas, particularly, as I've been saying, around the southern track of the system, And if you look at the radar imagery we're seeing at the moment, you will see the banding of the cyclone wrapping around the south. As that system comes in, that really heavy weather and the winds, etc., that go with it will move towards the coast and affect the Brisbane area. The flooding is a major concern over the coming 24 hours and then right through the weekend and beyond into next week. The heavy to intense rainfall is expected to produce the risk of flash and widespread minor to major riverine flooding. Flood watches remain in place from the Mary River through the creeks and rivers of the Sunshine Coast, the Pine and Caboolture rivers, the Gold Coast rivers and creeks, as well as the Upper and Lower Brisbane, and the Condamine, McIntyre and Weir rivers are also covered by flood watches. A major flood warning is current for the Logan and Albert rivers, and we are seeing river rises in that system where the rainfall has been concentrated, as I said, over the past 24 to 36 hours. So in summary, Tropical Cyclone Alfred remains a Category 2 system. It is moving slightly erratically, wobbling north and south, but it is continuing its gradual movement towards the southeast Queensland coast. And again, we expect it to cross the Bay Islands in the early hours of Saturday morning and then move through Moreton Bay during Saturday. Wind, rainfall, storm surge and flood risks remain. And those flood risks, as I mentioned, will continue right through the weekend and into next week after the system has moved inland. You can stay up to date with all these warnings and observations in the Bureau radar via the Bureau's app and the Bureau's webpage, and stay alert for updated messaging from emergency services. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I have really quite a brief update about some of the measures that the Commonwealth is taking to support the governments of Premier Crisafulli and also Premier Minns. I've indicated over this week that 2 of the heavy lift helicopters in the National Aerial Fleet are being pre-positioned in the region to provide support if required. The first of those has been in Coffs Harbour for some days. I can confirm that the second is in Bundaberg, which is an important resource that will be available if required. I know that many people, many Queenslanders will be thinking of the people to the south of the border, the people in the Northern Rivers who've been evacuated from their homes. It's been, I think we have to acknowledge a difficult 24 hours for many of those communities. I've spoken this morning to a number of the political leaders that I know well in that area. I think there's a sense of pride and confidence in the way that those communities are handling those issues, but nonetheless we are thinking of them. It is important that the ADF has been deployed to support the SES in that area, and I can confirm that ADF have arrived in that area. My final update is just in relation to our national coordination mechanism. We've been working closely with both the Queensland and New South Wales governments to work into the food and grocery supply chain. A national meeting again took place today, and I'll leave it to Deputy Premier Bley to provide further details about some of the outcomes of those discussions. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I can confirm that we've still had no loss of life and we have no missing persons as a result of this event. We are starting to see more requests for assistance filter through as the wind and rain intensifies down around the Gold Coast area, and we've had those reports of large trees damaging cars and houses and other infrastructure, our power line infrastructure, and we'll expect this to continue as the cyclone continues to track towards the coast. As the Premier said, we have seen severe erosion along the beaches, particularly in that main beach area, and police are now, I've confirmed, are assisting council with road closures and exclusion zones around those impacted areas, including the viewing boardwalks and around the lifeguard towers as a result of that coastal erosion. Since 10 a.m. this morning, the SES has received a further 307 jobs, mostly on the Gold Coast, and this relates to both sandbagging as well as structural related jobs of tarping, leaky roofs, etc., as well as assisting the community in sandbagging at those at-risk flood areas over the next coming days. The Queensland Police Service has received 76 jobs in the past 24 hours, since this morning, and we've seen glass come out of an apartment building on the 34th floor. Fortunately, that building was unoccupied, but also the police are assisting with those 59 affected roads. We've seen a significant amount of power lines down across our roadways, so if people are driving on our roads, please be very careful and treat all trees and power lines down as live power lines. Thank you. The Queensland Fire Department has received an additional 20 jobs since our last media conference, including community assistance, assisting other emergency services, but fortunately to date no swiftwater rescues at this stage. An emergency alert has just been issued for the Redlands local government area for North Stradbroke and the Lower Bay Islands to take shelter due to the impacts of Tropical Cyclone Alfred's expected this afternoon and overnight impacting that area. And this is something we can expect to see, whether it be today or over the coming days, with respect as the cyclone approaches the coast or as we move into those flooding events. We'll keep our community informed and give them as much information as we can. As the Premier said, there's just been more than 46,036 in fact power outages, mainly across the Gold Coast, Scenic Rim and Redlands area. Some suburbs in the Gold Coast and Gold Coast hinterlands area have now lost telecommunications coverage, and that's as a result of 26 of the mobile base stations losing power and running out of battery life. Those suburbs include Belinga North, Binnaburra, Burleigh Waters, Coolangatta, O'Reilly's, Parkwood, Bundall, Reedy Creek, Mudgeeraba, Currumbin and Springbrook. And NBN outages, which affect the landlines, are also occurring in those same areas. And the moment it's safe to do so, our telcos that we've been engaged with will get into those areas and try and get generation to those base stations. While we haven't had reports of inundation at this time, I can confirm that in some of the canal areas, the backyards, particularly around the Broadbeach waters area, we are seeing some water starting to lap onto those backyards, but we've had no inundation, and it's what we sort of see on the Gold Coast when we do see some heavy rain and as the tide approaches this afternoon. Door knocking continues today, as the Premier has indicated. We've now door knocked more than 9,000 homes. Now that'll continue in the Brisbane and surrounds area. The door knocking isn't continuing on the Gold Coast today. Our crews are into emergency response today. But around the Brisbane and surrounds, we'll continue that door knocking, mainly for those residents that will now be at risk of those riverine flooding and flash flooding over the next coming days. I can confirm that, please, there's still time to make a plan in those areas, particularly around that flood risk, is to make the plan now, understand that if you are going to leave your premises, think about when you will leave, where you will go, and family and friends, while we have our evacuation centres, and they will continue open for flood risk, but family and friends is the best place to be. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Acting Commissioner. Good afternoon. And for those tuning in, I'm Jared Blade, the Deputy Premier of Queensland. I just want to give an update in relation to supermarkets because, as you'd appreciate, it's been a lot of patience tested over the last few days and a lot of discussions had both at a state level and national level. I want to firstly, though, thank all the workers in retail and those that work in the supermarkets across Queensland. I want to particularly thank the ones that have gone home for their own safety, but have come back to work to stock the shelves or to stand behind the counter and serve Queenslanders to allow supermarkets to stay open a little bit longer. As has been described every day from the Bureau of Meteorology, where the tropical cyclone has slowed and not crossed as originally indicated, or when we thought, because of the unpredictable nature of tropical cyclones, we had early on shopping centres which were going to close, and we worked through the national agency. NEMA have been chairing meetings. I want to thank Jenny McAllister, the Minister, and I speak on a daily basis about how to try and coordinate it both from a New South Wales perspective, a Queensland perspective, but through NEMA, which is the National Emergency Management Agency, who chairs the meeting. As described by the Minister, it met today, it's meeting tomorrow, and it met yesterday. And that's about making sure all of the retailers, both the small retailers, the large retailers, the New South Wales Government, the Queensland Government and the Commonwealth Government, and all the freighters, all the logistic companies work together to ensure we get groceries back onto supermarket shelves. So early on, a few days ago, we had supermarkets, based on the warnings, were going to shut early and close their supermarkets. But with a lot of work and effort, they managed to get staff back to get behind the counter and actually keep these supermarkets open. So it has been a store-by-store basis. There are some supermarkets located in large shopping centres that the supermarkets don't have a choice, where the shopping centre says they've closed for safety reasons, and the supermarkets haven't had a choice but to close. There are other situations where you're also dealing, we're all humans, we're dealing with staff that are wondering their own homes, particularly the more south you go in the Gold Coast and northern New South Wales area, that are worrying about their own homes and flood inundation and their families. So I really want to pay tribute to the grocery workers, the supermarket workers, and the retail workers who have kept stores open for as long as they possibly can. However, I would say to Queenslanders that you will expect over the next 24 hours for supermarkets to progressively be closing from this afternoon. As we have been told by the Bureau of Meteorology, Tropical Cyclone Alfred is likely to hit shore or the land midday tomorrow, and then it's important for the workers of the supermarkets to be where they need to be, as safe as possible. It's also clear that distribution centres, as of this afternoon, have started to close down. Farms are not producing at the moment because I think we're going to be in a 24-hour period where product is going to be less, and supermarkets will be closed, particularly over the next 24 hours. So for Queenslanders, you will progressively see this afternoon supermarkets closing, including your local grocer and supermarkets. But as I said at the start, I want to do a shout out to all the workers that have come back to work to keep supermarkets open for as long as possible in the preparation for the Tropical Cyclone Alfred hitting the shores. We will keep assessing this on a daily basis, and I can assure you, from the Commonwealth Government's perspective, the New South Wales and the Queensland Government's perspective, we'll do what we can to ensure the roads are open and the trucks can get through and the stocks reshelved as soon as possible. We'll keep updating everyone on a daily basis. The last piece of advice I can give Queenslanders is, if you go onto your local supermarket's website, all the stores will be listed. The times are going to be closing from this afternoon, but that was a decision made at the national meeting today, that progressively stores will shut down this afternoon. And I think, as Queenslanders would expect, as we don't know what's going to happen with Tropical Cyclone Alfred over the next 24 hours, you'd expect all our workers to be safe, and that is at their home or their family. So thank you, everybody. We'll keep giving everyone updates when NEMA chairs the meeting tomorrow, the National Coordination Authority for all the supermarket chains and logistics. But our priority is to ensure we get the stocks back on the shelves when the supermarkets start reopening. And importantly and finally, the message is, once supermarkets do reopen, I think patience is going to be required. I'd plead with people for a bit of patience. As you'd appreciate, farms will be impacted. Freight logistics to fill the supermarkets, the shelves will be challenging, particularly if staff have properties that are impacted. So I think all Queenslanders will understand and appreciate natural disasters, and a little bit of patience and care for our retail hospitality workers in the next few days. Thank you. Premier.
Thank you, Deputy Premier, and thank you, Minister, for the way that you've worked together. Over to you.
Premier, for those residents in potentially flood-affected areas, what should they be doing tonight and into the earliest hours of the morning? Should they be trying to stay awake to assess damage and whatnot? What's the best course of action?
They need to have a plan, and they need to watch the forecast. And part of the reason why the Bureau has gone to hourly updates is to enable that information to flow. Now, when it comes to river and creek flooding, the majority of people know if they are in one of those areas. If you don't, go onto the website, disaster.qld.gov.au, and have a look at those council flood maps, those overlays. That's important. Have a plan. Have an evacuation plan if you're in one of those areas. If in doubt, go and stay with friends and family. That's your life is worth more than anything else.
Premier, when is it too late to go to an evacuation centre?
Well, McKenna, the evacuation centres are a last resort, and we have to continue to say that. We thank councils for standing them up, and there's 30 of them that have been nominated. But they are a last resort, but they're there for people if they're if there's no other choice to go there, we recommend, if it's possible, to go and stay with someone else, with friends or family. But it's, of course, we have to have a place for people to be able to take refuge if they need to. And likewise, if they are impacted, it's just a source, a single point of truth that they can go to. We're asking people to have a plan. That's the greatest thing you can have in this. So in the same way that we were speaking to people in the last couple of days, as the earlier phase of preparing for the wind and the waves, we were saying to people, make sure you clean your yard, but also have that box with all of the key items. It's the same. It's the same with this. Just know where you are, have a plan, and you will get through it.
Premier, have you been briefed on whether Brisbane could face power outages for several days, similar to down south?
Well, I think Peter from Energex answered that this morning, in that it's always the way that if power is cut, getting it back on is the most important thing for everyone's sake in terms of the recovery. Now, how long that takes, that depends as to what the damage is. Is it just line damage? Is it damage to key transformers? All of those things impact on how long it takes to get back up. But I make this promise to Queenslanders, and that is restoring electricity is front and centre of any recovery. And we have taken the response to this seriously. We will take the recovery even more seriously. And, you know, at the moment, we said there's 46,000 people without power. It's a terrible experience to have that over a longer period of time. What we can do is make sure that we are ready to respond. And to reiterate what we've been saying and why I'm very confident that you will see connections in record time, there are 1,200 Energex staff who have been working and serving their community, but more importantly, are now ready and waiting to respond to whatever the damage looks like after the event. And there's 800 Ergon staff who will come in and give them a spell when they're tired to keep the show on the road. So those preparations are in place, and I've got every confidence that they will move heaven and earth to make it work.
Premier, for those areas without power, without telecommunications, how are you going to disseminate information to them so you can't door knock all those people?
Alex, they will, and that's something that the acting commissioner has said. They will go door to door. That is important. Where those telecommunication towers go out, if there's key information that needs to get to them, door knocking will take place. Now, we hope that they've been availing themselves of the information before those towers go down, but if they need key information, they'll get it.
Just a quick one for the Deputy Premier.
Last one.
Yes.
Deputy, are you happy with what the Games Venues Review team has recommended?
Are there any more questions on the impending cyclone that's about to hit land, or are we going to Olympic and Paralympic Games?
One for the Minister.
Let's do that, and then we'll come to other issues, shall we?
And then we do have to go to us. Sorry. Minister, we're hearing reports casual staff have been stood down for several days now. I imagine there will be for more days. Is there any talk of financial assistance for those people to get through this disaster?
Look, the Commonwealth does have mechanisms to provide support of this kind, and we're dependent on advice about impacts. We're constantly assessing the impacts that are occurring in communities. Obviously, our focus right now is on public safety. We are in the response phase of an emergency, and all of our thoughts are with making sure that emergency services personnel have what they need to keep community safe. However, as you've heard this afternoon, we are also thinking about the recovery, and we will certainly be thinking through those issues in the coming days.
All right. What was your question?
Yes, so are you happy with what the Games Venues Review team has recommended to you?
Well, I'm not sure because I don't get the report till tomorrow. So the 100-day review will be handed to me tomorrow, which is the 8th of March. Then the government will consider it, and as we have indicated, we'll release it to everybody, and the government response on the 25th of March.
But have you not had the draft for the last 2 weeks?
Indeed.
Are you happy with the draft at least?
All will be revealed on the 25th of March, pursuant to what we indicated, and the Cabinet will consider my recommendations to government on the 24th of March, and then we'll release it together with, I might add, the report. So Queenslanders will see the final report on the Games, and then they'll also see the government report on the 25th, government response on the 25th of March. and we will get on with it. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Duke. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.